What's happening, YouTube? This is Carrie from Side Trippin' with Carrie, and I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona, a little bit west, actually on 4th Street, South 4th Street and Grant Street, and behind me is the west side of the old Carver High School. It's now the George Washington Carver Museum, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Carver and some of its illustrious faculty, as well as one student in particular who was a member of the 1952 and 1954 championship basketball team at Carver, Arizona High School championship basketball team here at Carver, and his name was Charles Christopher, and who tragically died very young. All right, we are approaching the front of Carver High School, and Carver High School started out in Phoenix in 1926 as Phoenix Union Colored High School, and it was a segregated high school. If you were African American and a high school student from the mid-20s through the 30s, 40s, and early 50s, this is where you had to go to high school. You couldn't go anyplace other. And again, it was open from 1926 to 1954. And a lot of people would probably tell you that Brown versus Board of Education is what forced the school to integrate, or for integration to occur in the other high schools, I should say, and for Carver to shut down. But that wasn't the case. Actually, a Maricopa County Superior Court judge ruled that segregation was unconstitutional here at the high school before Brown v. Board of Education was ruled on. And so I think what happened was, in Maricopa County Superior Court Maricopa County is the county that Phoenix sits in, and that's where the civil cases over a certain amount, or civil cases involving injunctive relief, meaning where you're suing somebody to get them to do something or to stop doing something, where those kind of cases would be heard. And that case, like I said, a Maricopa County Superior Court judge, I believe his name was Struckmeyer, ruled that segregation here at Carver was unconstitutional. And again, that occurred a couple of months before Brown versus Board of Education came down and became the law of the land, was applied as the law of the land through the Supreme Court's ruling, the United States Supreme Court ruling. And I guess if the Phoenix Union High School District wanted to appeal the Maricopa County Superior Court ruling, that wasn't going to happen with that Supreme Court ruling coming out there a few months later. So outside of the school entrance, here's a statue of George Washington Carver, who passed away in the early 40s. And George Washington Carver, was a African-American scientist, worked in the agricultural field, and the school was named after him posthumously after he passed away in the 40s, and became known as Carver High School. And this school has a lot of history. I've got some personal connections to the school. I had a cousin who worked here. She was my dad's first cousin, so I guess that makes we were second cousins to each other. And her name was Gussie Edwards, and I knew her as Cousin Gussie. She eventually married a very nice man that that I knew later in both of their lives, Booker Wilson. And we're going to visit their final resting places too. But Cousin Gussie taught here for years, was a much beloved teacher, and she taught home economics and prepared a lot of not just female students, male students too, for later life, and some of them went on to college. I also knew personally Mr. Jordan, who was a science teacher here and also the coach of the Arizona High School champion Carver Monarchs basketball team in 1952 and 1954, right before the school closed. And I knew him personally. The way he came to the school is kind of an interesting tale. Again, it kind of has a personal touch or a personal connection to me and my family. Mr. Jordan was essentially recruited here by Jack Adkins, who was a teacher, a physical education, I believe, teacher here at Carver at the time. And they were both members of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And Alpha Phi Alpha was is a fraternity. It was the first fraternity founded by African American men in 1906 at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And the reason why I know a little bit about that history is that my father was an Alpha, his brother was an Alpha. My dad had 4 sisters, 2 of them married Alphas. And once I went to college at Arizona State University, I became an Alpha. So that's kind of the connection there. One feature of African American fraternities that's kind of unique is that they have a lot of similarities to the other fraternities you might be thinking of, and but it's not. It's a little bit more than that, especially once you graduate. The African American fraternities and sororities have graduate chapters, and participation in the fraternity continues, or the sororities for women. They continue, and they do a big feature of the fraternity and sorority lives are service to the community. And I can remember as a kid my dad hosting fraternity meetings, and they would have like kind of a social hour where these guys would get together and maybe have a few drinks and sit and eat dinner that my mother would make. But then at a certain point my mother and I would have to leave and or get out of the room and then they would get down to business and have their fraternity meetings. And that's where I met Mr. Jordan and Mr. Adkins. They were both not only fraternity brothers of my dad, but they were also his very close friends. He spent a lot of time with both of those men, even outside of the fraternity. They were just good friends. So this is Carver, and we are gonna head over to Greenwood, visit the final resting places of my cousin Gussie, Mr. Jordan, and we're also gonna visit the final resting place of a star of that 1952 and 1954 championship basketball teams. And he was also a member of the Arizona State University basketball team after he graduated, a fellow by the name of Charles Christopher, who tragically died young. And we're going to talk more about him when we get over there to Greenwood. And this is the west side of the school, and we are approaching what used to be the football field that's been paved over, and there's space there that the Phoenix Union High School district used to use for storage. And what we're coming across now is the old grandstand for the football field. And as you can see, there are what appear to be like old classrooms, shop spaces below the grandstands. And here's an old shop building. We're back here at Greenwood Memory Lawn Cemetery in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're visiting the final resting place of Charles Christopher. And Charles was a member of the Arizona High School Championship basketball team of 1952 and 1954 at Carver High School. And Charles was an excellent basketball player and was talented enough to get a scholarship at Arizona State University, where he played on the 1954-55 team. And what is so unfortunate for Charles was that, when he was playing for ASU, he was their leading scorer for the first 12 games of the season, and he was a freshman, so he was killing it. But unfortunately, he hurt his wrist, and after the season was over, he had surgery, and unfortunately, during the surgery, his heart stopped. And I mean, we're talking, think about it, we're talking a 20-year-old man, the prime of his life, college athlete, and his heart, and we're talking, this is the mid 50s, so they didn't have all the medical equipment and techniques that they have now. So they had to actually crack open his chest, physically massage his heart, and they brought it back to beating. Okay, they put him, they got the heart beating again. He started breathing again, and they put him in under an oxygen tent. Things seemed to be going, okay. He seemed to be on his road to recovery. And then a couple hours later, he had essentially a heart attack and passed away. And again, this was started with surgery to correct a wrist injury. And so it was just very tragic, a very tragic end to Mr. Christopher. And, and it makes you wonder what could have been. Could he have, as talented as he was, he seemed almost a shoo-in to hopefully play in the NBA, or the kind of the precursors to the NBA. Well, no, I guess the NBA was going around the mid 50s, and hopefully he would have made it. Buried next to him are his parents, Luther and Mady. And what's interesting with them is that they both passed away on the same day in 1977, March 27, 1977, but I was unable to find anything anywhere on what happened to them. I found a obituary for them, but it didn't list, a cause of death. And it's just, you would think that, I don't know, a house fire or a car accident, something like that, but it just wasn't listed. So, I'm going to do some more digging, but if anybody else can kind of discover what happened to Charles's parents, that'd be great if you can put it in the comments. All right, well, next we're going to visit the final resting place of Mr. Jordan, Leon Jordan, who again was a friend of my father's and somebody that I knew personally. I also knew his children very well, his daughter Kay and his son Steve Jordan. And Steve Jordan and I actually went to high school together. He was a senior when I was a freshman at South Mountain High School here in Phoenix. And Steve was a huge football star. And so much so that he went, and he was also brilliant. He's smart. He was a engineering major and played football at Brown University, and later played in the NFL for the Minnesota Vikings. And you might recognize that last name, Jordan, not Michael Jordan, but Cameron Jordan is Steve's son. And Cameron Jordan plays defense. I think he's a defensive end or defensive lineman for the New Orleans Saints. And I met him once too, but Steve, I know Steve, like I said, very well. Actually, Steve and I are fraternity brothers, as was his father and my father. And so we're gonna go and visit Mr. Jordan's and his wife, Mrs. Jordan. We're gonna visit their final resting place and pay our last respects to them. And here's the final resting place of Mr. and Mrs. Jordan, Leon Jordan and Kathleen Jordan. As many years as I knew them, I certainly never called either one of them by their first names. I was just fresh out of high school when Mr. Jordan passed away young, and Mrs. Jordan, I was grown. I can remember talking to Steve about his mom shortly before she passed, and I knew them. Heck, they knew me, probably my entire life, or close to it, very close to it. So they are missed, sorely missed. They were some good folks, and probably nobody misses them more than Steve and Kay and their kids, and anybody honestly that was lucky enough to know either one of them. They were really good people. I guess the final stop here at Greenwood will be to the final resting place of my cousin Gussie, who was a teacher at Carver for many years. She taught home economics, and from what I understand, was very well loved and liked by her students at Carver. So we will go there now. We're in the Serenity Mausoleum here at Greenwood and visiting the final resting place of my cousin, Gussie Wilson. And she's entombed here next to her husband, Nick, Booker T. Nick Wilson Sr. Nick always wanted me and my brother, even when we were kids, we just called him Nick, and he was a very nice man. They lived for years up in Prescott after they both retired. Nick was in the service, and I believe he was in the Air Force for years, retired, and he was stationed in Hawaii, which had to be a great assignment, I would imagine. And Gussie, again, was an educator. She was a home ec teacher, longtime home economics teacher at Carver. Just kind of pan around a little here. And that concludes this video on Carver High School. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, please subscribe to the channel and give it a like if you liked it. leave some comments, let me know how we're doing, and I will see you on the next one.